Myst, the Book of Donnie continues with Video 5 as read by the bathroom reader. I am covering for the plurality report who is wondering why vinegar isn't an ingredient in your average tube of toothpaste. Eridanu was next, a newer age but lacking a Guild of Maintainers stamp. They had found the book, partly damaged, in one of the upper district houses. It seemed okay, but that lack of a stamp worried Atris. As Karad and Eros helped Easel climb into the EV suit, the door at the far end of the lab hissed open, and Merrim hurried in. "I'm sorry I'm late, Master Atris," she said, clearly relieved to see that Easel had not yet linked. Atris looked up from where he was working and nodded. Merrim hastened across, moving between Karad and Oma to slip something over Easel's neck. "What is it?" Easel asked quietly. He had already inserted his arms into the suit's voluminous sleeves, and so could not reach the delicate pendant. "It's a charm," Merrim said, "for luck." Easel glanced across at Atris, but Atris was busy, making a final check of the apparatus they would use to analyze the samples. "Thanks," Easel said quietly, clearly touched by her gesture. Merrim stood back, then watched as Karad and Eros went about their work. Satisfied, they moved back, letting Atris take over. "Are you all right in there, Easel?" There was a muffled response, barely audible. The right-hand glove flexed and unflexed, the signal that all was well. "Good," Atris said. He turned, looking to the others, who at once began to move the bulky suit toward the cage. As Easel stepped out, then turned to face them, the cell fell silent. There was a tension in the room that had not been there before. All was ready. Once again, Atris looked to Easel and placed his left hand over the back of his right, miming the signal. Easel nodded, then nervously copied the movement. The suit shimmered in the air, then it was gone. One beat, 2 beats, and it was back. No flames, no smoke. Thank the Maker, Miriam thought, seeing Easel's head move through the clear glass of the visor. At once they swarmed about him, gloved hands reaching through the bars to pluck things from him, divesting the suit of its various sampling devices, even as, overhead, the great machine slowly descended, a fine mist of spray beginning to rain over the suit, cleansing it. Only Atris spoke, questioning Easel about what he'd seen. "What's it like?" "Beautiful." The word was clear despite the muffling effect of the helmet, but what he said next was less easy to make out. "What's that?" Atris said, straining to hear. "People," Easel answered, that single word again quite clear. His eyes shone. A broad grin split his face. "There are people there." They linked through an hour later, after the analysis of the samples had been confirmed what Easel had seen. Eridanu was a lush and beautiful age, a world of huge trees and peaceful lakes. They linked into a clearing overlooking one of those lakes, an ancient wood and stone village nestled into the folds of the hills just below them. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. As Atris and his party walked down, men stepped from the cabins to greet them, open-handed and smiling. When several dozen children had gathered, children milling about their feet, they made their introductions. Their spokesman, a man named Gadren, took Atris's hands firmly, a broad smile on his face.
"We knew you would come back when we saw the suit," he laughed. "Why, it half frightened the children to death."
"I'm sorry," Atris began, but Gadren waved his apology away.
No, we knew at once what it was, and you were right to take precautions. This is an old world."
"And beautiful," Atris said.
"Yes."
Gadren looked about him thoughtfully, then.
"You come from Donnie, I take it?"
We do.
And how are things there?
We are rebuilding.
And are there other survivors?
More than 1,000. Gadrin's face lit at the sound of that.
1,000?
Then, more seriously,
And you want us to return, yes? To help you rebuild?
you are welcome, yet the choice is yours.
And has anyone said no?
Atris hesitated. No one had actually said no, but in the 3 instances there had been a promise to come later, promises that had not yet been kept. You must do as you see fit, he answered finally, if you are happy here.
Oh, we are happy, Atris, never happier. Yet happiness is not everything, is it? There is also duty and responsibility. I love this place true enough, but I was a guildman once, and I swore oath to stand by Donnie to the end. When Donnie fell, I felt the obligation had lapsed. But if it is to be rebuilt...
You need time to discuss this among you? Atris asked, looking about him at the villagers, noting how few of them were older than himself. Gadrin smiled.
There is no need for that. The matter was settled long ago. If Donnie calls, we will answer.
He gripped Atris's hands again.
We shall give what help we can.
Later, when they were all sitting in Gadrin's cabin talking, someone mentioned the old man who lived alone on an island in the lake. An old man? Atris asked, interested.
His name is Tergan,
Gadrin's wife, Ferris, said before her husband could speak.
and he keeps bitterness for a wife.
He lives a hermit's life,
Gadrin said, frowning at his wife.
Hermit indeed,
Ferris said, making a face back at her husband.
If we see the old stick once a year, that's oftener than most.
Is he Donnie?
Oh, indeed,
Gadrin said.
A fine old gentleman he must have been. A master, I'd guess. Though of what guild I wouldn't know.
You didn't know him then?
Not at all. You see, he was passing our house when it all happened. The great cavern was filling up with that evil gas, and there was no time for him to get back to his own district. My father, rest his soul, saw him and asked him in. He linked here with us.
And afterward, did he not try to return? Gadrin looked down.
We did not let him. He wanted to, but my father would not let no one use the linking book. Not for a year. Then he went himself. After that, no one went.
And the linking book?
My father destroyed it.
Atris thought a moment, then stood. I would like to meet this Tergan and talk with him. Try to persuade him to come with us.
You can try,
Ferris said, ignoring her husband's frown.
but I doubt you'll get a word out of him. He'll scuttle away like a squirrel and hide in the woods behind his cabin till you're gone.
He's that unsociable?
Oh, aye,
Gadrin said with a laugh.
But if you're keen to meet with him, I'll row you there myself, Atris. And on the way, you can tell me what's been happening in Donnie.
Their destination was at the far end of the lake, over a mile from the village. The lake curved sharply here, ending in a massive wall of dark granite. The island lay beneath that daunting barrier, its wooded slopes reflected in the dark mirror of the lake. As they rowed toward it, that mirror shimmered and distorted. A narrow stone jetty reached out into the lake. From there, a path led up among the trees. Tergan's cabin was near the top of the island, enclosed by the darkness of the wood. It was silent on those slopes, silent and dark. Standing just below the cabin, staring up into its shadowed porch, Gadrin cupped his hands to his mouth and hailed the old man.
Tergan! Tergan! You have a visitor!
I know.
The words startled them. They turned to find the old man behind them, less than 10 paces away. Tergan was not simply old, he looked ancient. His face was deeply lined, his eyes sunken in their orbits. Not a shred of hair was on his head. The pate of which was mottled with age, yet he held himself upright, and there was something about his bearing, a sharpness in his eyes behind the lenses, that suggested he was still some distance from senility. Atris took a breath, then offered his hands.
Master Targon, I am honored to meet you. My name is Atris.
The old man stared at him a while, then shook his head.
No, you're far too young.
Atris, he repeated, of the Guild of Writers, son of Gen, grandson of Master Atris.
The old man's eyes blinked at that last name.
And Tiana?
Tiana was my grandmother.
Turgon fell silent. He looked down at the ground for a long time, as if lost in his thoughts. Then, finally, he looked up again.
Ah,
he said.
Ah.
Are you all right, Master Targon?
Gadrin asked, concerned for him, but Turgon gave an impatient gesture with his hands.
Leave me,
he said, a hint of bad temper in his voice.
I need to talk to the boy.
Atris looked about, then realized that Targon meant him.
Well,
Targon said, staring pointedly at Gadrin.
Haven't you a boat to look after?
Then, turning, pulling his coat tighter about him, he stomped past Atris and up the slope.
Come,
he said, stepping up into the shadows of the porch.
Come, Atris, son of Gen. We need to talk.
The interior of the cabin was small and dark. A bulging knapsack sat beside the open door, its drawstring tied. At the center of the room was a table with a single chair. Standing on the far side of the table, Turgon put his arm out, indicating that Atris should be seated. There were shelves of books on the walls and prints, things that must have been there before Turgon came. Declining the offer of the chair, Atris stood there, facing Turgon across the table.
Forgive me, Master Targon, but I sensed just now, when I mentioned my grandfather's name, that you knew him.
I knew of him. He was a good man and an excellent guildsman.
Turgon stared at Atris intently a moment.
Indeed, you're very like him now that I come to look.
Atris took a long breath.
We came here.
To ask us to return?
Turgon nodded.
Yes, I understand all that. And I'm ready.
Ready? For once, Atris could not keep the surprise from his voice.
But surely you'll want time to pack?
I have already packed,
Turgon answered, indicating the bag beside the door.
When I heard the boat coming and saw you on it, I knew.
You knew?
Oh, yes. I've been waiting a long time now, 70 years in this cursed place. But I knew you would come eventually, or someone like you.
And all this? Atris gesturing toward the books, the various objects scattered on the shelves about the room.
Forget them,
Turgon answered.
They were never mine. Now come, Atris. I will not wait another hour in this place.
The final searches took much longer than the earlier ones. As Atris had foreseen, the majority of them proved to be dangerous, unstable ages, and the EV suit found much further use. But there were successes, one book in particular, an old, rather decrepit volume for which Atris had held very little hope. Yielded up a colony of 300 men, women, and children. This and a second, much smaller group from a book that had been partly damaged in the fall swelled the population of New Donny to just over 1,800 souls. On the evening of that final search, 8 weeks after they had linked to Sedona, Atris threw a feast to celebrate. That evening was one of the high points of their venture, and there was much talk of, and many toasts to, the rebirth of Donny. Yet, in the more sober atmosphere of the next morning, all there realized the scale of the task confronting them. When a great empire falls, it is not easy trying to lift the lifeless carcass back onto its feet. Even if many more had survived, it would have been difficult. As it was, there were not enough of them to fill a single district, let alone a great city such as Donny. At the final count, there were 618 adult males, and of them a mere 17 had been guildsmen. Atris, making his final reckoning before beginning the next phase of the reconstruction, knew that one thing and one thing only could carry them through: hard work. Each night he fell into his bed, exhausted. Day after day he felt this way, like a machine that cannot rest until it is switched off completely. Each night he would sleep the sleep of the dead, and each morning he would rise to take on his burden once again. And little by little things got done, but never enough, never a tenth of what he wanted to achieve. One morning Atris wandered out to see how Master Tamon was faring. Tamon had cleared most of the fallen masonry from the site, exposing the interior of the ancient guild house, and now he was about to begin the most delicate phase of the operation, lifting an internal wall that had come down in what had been the dining hall. The fallen wall had smashed through the mosaic floor in several places, revealing the hypocaust beneath it. Master Tamon's problem was how to clear away the massive chunks of fallen wall without the damaged floor collapsing beneath his team as they worked. After much consideration, he had decided that this was a simple mining problem, an exercise in shoring up and chipping out, and therefore he had called in young Jeniran, a sprightly 90-year-old who had been a cadet in the Guild of Miners when Donnie fell. When Atris arrived, the two men were standing, their heads together, on one side of the site, a sheet of hand-drawn diagrams held between them as they debated the matter.
"Oh, Atris,"
Tamon exclaimed.
"perhaps you can help us resolve something."
"Is there another problem?"
"Not so much a problem," Jeniran said, "as a small difference of opinion."
"Go on," said Atris patiently.
"Well, Master Tamon wishes to lift the wall and save the floor, and I can see why. It's a very beautiful piece of mosaic, but to do so, we would have to get beneath the floor and prop it up. And that will take days, possibly weeks, of hard work and involve considerable risks for those undertaking the task."
Atris nodded. "And your alternative?" Jeniran glanced at Tamon, then went on.
"I say, let's give up the floor. Let's drop weights on it and smash the whole thing through, then clear up the mess. It will not only save us precious days, but cut out any risk of injury."
"But the floor, Atris, look at it."
Atris looked. He could see only the edges, and they were covered in a fine layer of dust. But he had seen the diagrams of the guild house and remembered this mosaic well. It would be a great shame to lose it. Then again, Jeniran had a point about the safety element, and the floor was badly damaged as it was. And then there was so much else to do, so much to clear away, so much to repair and make good. Thinking that, Atris made his decision. "Can I have a word, Master Tamon?" he said, laying an arm about the older man's shoulders and turning him away. The floor gave with a huge creaking sigh. There was a deafening crash that echoed all about the cavern. Dust rose in a great choking cloud. Studying the scene through his visor, Atris felt a moment's regret. As the dust began to clear, there was a murmur of surprise from the watching helpers. Something was wrong. The hole was much deeper than they had imagined it would be, and longer. Atris blinked, then raised his visor, staring into what appeared to be some kind of hall beneath the old guild house, 2 rows of massive pillars flanking it. He turned, looking to Tamon. "Master Tamon, is there anything in the plans?" Tamon looked mystified.
"Nothing. At least, nothing like that."
"The hypocaust." But Atris could see that the ancient heating system that ran beneath the ancient guild house had collapsed, and whatever it was lay beneath that. "Well," he said after a moment's reflection, "I guess we'd best bring lamps and investigate."
Go down there?
Master Tamon asked. Certainly, Atris said, intrigued by what he could glimpse within that shadow. Those pillars seem strong enough.
We should check them first.
Of course. Atris looked about him, calling to this one to bring this, that one to do that, organizing them, being the hub about which they all revolved. Yet even as he orchestrated it all, in his mind, he was already down there, poking among the shadows, trying to piece together the mystery. Merim, come quickly! They've found something beneath the guild house! Merim had turned at the first hearing of her name. Now she set aside the book she had been reading and stood. Beneath it? Yes, Iras said, coming up to her, breathless from running. We broke through the floor of the old dining hall, and there was a chamber underneath it. Well, he said after a moment, aren't you going to come and see? I have work to do, she said, and it was true. She was teaching some of the younger children basic Dani, and she had to prepare the work for tomorrow's lessons, but this was important. Okay, she said, just to look, then I must get back here. Come on, then. And with that, Iris took her hand and half dragged her across the square and beneath the arch, heading for the guild house. By the time they got there, a number of ladders had already been lowered into the hole, and lamps set up along one side. Atris, Tamon, and Jenneran stood in a huddle some 10 feet away from the overhang, Jenneran holding up a lamp as they stared into the chamber, where several of Tamon's helpers were checking the pillars for any signs of cracking. Seeing what was beyond them, Merim felt a ripple of excitement. It was magnificent, like the entrance hall to a great palace. The walls and pillars appeared to be of beautifully colored marble, and farther in, the floor looked like a polished mirror. She was still staring when Isol and Oma hurried up. There was a moment's stunned silence as they took in the sight. Then Oma spoke. It has to be. Why? Isol asked. Because what else could it be? But they're only stories. You said so yourself. Maybe, but even myths are based on something, and maybe that's the something. What's that? Atris called from below. It was in one of my grandfather's books on Dani legends, Oma said, walking over to the edge and addressing Atris. There were several mentions of a great king, and of his temple, and of a hall of beautifully colored marble. And you think this might be it? They were only tales, Isol said apologetically, but Oma shook his head. That is exactly how it is described. The 2 rows of massive pillars, and at the end of the hall there's a great doorway surrounded by a circle of stars. So the book says, Isol quickly added. Atris nodded thoughtfully. All right, come down, all of you. Let's see if Oma is right or not. Atris led the way under the lip of the rock and into the great chamber, his lamp held high, the fire marble burning with a fierce white light that seemed to emphasize the purity of the colors in the stone. The rows of pillars on either side of the hall went on endlessly, it seemed, each pillar so huge that to Merim, walking between them, it seemed as though they walked in the halls of ancient giants. Deep, deep into the rock it went. And then, suddenly, there it was, the far end of the chamber, and there, just where Oma had said it would be, was a huge doorway, set within a great circle of stone, a dozen broad steps leading up to it. They approached, stopping at the foot of the steps, looking up at that massive doorway. Stars, Atris said.
Then this is it, Tamon, who stood beside him, agreed. The temple of the great king.
Maybe he's inside, Oma said excitedly. Maybe this is his tomb. If so, Atris looked at him. Was there anything else in the tales that we should know about, Oma? Oma hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing that I remember. Only those mentions of the prophecies. Yes, Merim said, but they were in Gen's notebook. In view of how much else he wrote was suspect, We can't be sure that they were all true. I agree, Atris said. Then, turning to Eras, he added, Go up and examine it. Eras climbed the steps. For a time he was silent, examining the edges of the great door meticulously. Then he looked back at Atris. It looks as though there was a real door here at some stage, but it's been sealed up, and a very efficient job too, by the look of it. Atris looked at Tamon. We could sound it. If there is a chamber behind that, then it will show up on a sounding scan. Tamon nodded, suddenly enthusiastic. There were machines in the Miners' Guild house. If they're still there, we could use those. Atris smiled. Excellent. Then arrange it, Master Tamon. Meanwhile, we'll set up lamps in here. And Oma? Yes, Atris? Bring me the book you spoke of, your grandfather's book. I would like to read those passages myself. Atris looked up from the page and frowned. Nothing was clear. Everything was hearsay and rumor. Of dates and names and facts there was nothing. Even so, those 2 lines where the chamber was described had a powerful effect. They seemed to give some credence to the rest, for if they were true... He felt the soft touch of familiar hands on his shoulders. Atris? Yes, my love. Aren't you coming? In a moment. He hesitated, then half-turned, looking up at her. Those passages in my father's notebook. Wasn't there a mention of a great library? There was, but not in connection with the great king. It had taken 8 of them to haul the capsule, up the makeshift tracks and position it on the platform alongside the door. Now Master Tamon sat at the controls of a large crystalline craft, while Janarin read from the guild manual.
Forgive me, Master Tamon,
someone said, pushing through the crowd of watchers at the foot of the steps.
But might I have a word?
Tamon turned, about to make some bad-tempered comment, when he saw who it was.
Why, Master Targan, then of course, come on up, if you know anything that might help.
The old man slowly made his way up the steps until he stood at the rear of the sounding capsule. He looked about him, then nodded to himself. Tamon stood, indicating that Turgon should take his place. The old man did so, once more looking about him, familiarizing himself with the controls. He gently felt each knob, each switch, recalling their function. Reaching out, he grasped the headphones and pulled them on. You know how to operate that, Master Turgon? Atris asked, stepping up.
We'll see,
the old man answered without turning, laying one hand gently, respectfully on the long metal shaft of the sounder. Turgon closed his eyes, then gently eased the shaft down and to the left, pressing on the pearled handle as he did. At once a single pure note grew in the air, yet even as it formed its perfect shape, the tone clear and clean, Turgon twitched the end of the shaft. At once the note died, and returned, changed, from the rock. Turgon's eyes slowly opened. He looked at Tamon, then, nudging the shaft a little to the right, closed his eyes again and gently pushed down on the shaft. A second note grew, slightly stronger and higher than the first, and once again, even as it formed, Turgon killed it. Again there was an echo from the rock, different this time, much lower than the sound that had come back from the time before. Atris watched, closing his eyes each time a note sounded, trying to make out some discernible difference in what came back, and indeed there did seem to be some kind of pattern to what he was hearing. 20, 30 times Turgon sent a signal into the rock. Then finally he sat back, nodding to himself.
I'll need to make more soundings. A lot more, but...
Turgon swiveled round on the seat.
There is definitely a hollow behind that wall, a void of some kind. But how big it is much harder to tell. My ear was never trained to make distinctions of that kind.
Atris nodded. We should discuss things and hear all sides before we choose to act. If it's sealed, there might be a good reason why.
Wise words, Turgon said. If the Dani chose to seal that chamber and erase all mention of it from their history, then perhaps they had a reason for doing so.
I agree, Atris said. We should discover if anything more is known of the great king and of the events surrounding the sealing of his temple. Maybe one or another of our company heard some tale at their mother's knee that might add to the sum of our knowledge, scant as it is. Until then, we should do nothing rash. I shall call a meeting, Atris went on, tonight. In the meantime, Master Targon, if you would continue with your soundings. Targon nodded, no flicker of emotion in his deeply lined face. I shall be guessing at best. Then guess your best guess, and if there is anything else you need, give instructions to young Eras here. He can be your legs. Targon nodded tersely, then turned back, returning to his task. Atris watched him a moment, then turned away. Come, he said to Catherine as he began to make his way down the steps. We have a meeting to arrange. So, Atris began, addressing the small group gathered in his room that evening after the meeting, it all comes down to hearsay. And what is written in your father's notebook, Catherine added. Yes, Atris said, and that is little enough. He paused, then, even so, I think we might take a look and see what's on the other side, but caution must be our byword. Once Master Targon has completed his soundings, we shall make a sample drilling and push a scope through and see what's to be seen.
And then?
Karad asked. Atris smiled. And then, if all is well, we shall breach the seal and go inside. Back at the doorway, Master Targon had finished his soundings. As Atris returned, he was sitting on the bottom step, papers scattered about him, hunched forward over a chart, writing. Atris stopped several paces from him. Master Targon? The old man looked up, then gestured for Atris to join him. See, he said, indicating the diagram he had been working on. It seems to go back quite some way, but it's not very wide. No wider, it would seem, than the circle itself. Atris studied the diagram a moment, then looked up at the circle of stone that surrounded the doorway. A tunnel, you think? It might be. Atris turned. Eras, help Master Tamon bring a drill from the guild house, one of the small-bore machines with a sealed end. The kind we can take an air sample from, and a scope. It's time we saw what's behind there. It took them more than an hour to set up the drill, the heavy frame in which it rested placed low down and at the center of the door. Then, with Master Tamon supervising and Atris looking on, they began, the drill bit encased as it was within the transparent shielding sheath, nudging the stone surface, then biting deep, the whine of the drill filling that brightly lit space beneath the old guild hall. Slowly it ate into the toughened rock. Then, with a marked change of tone, a downward whine, it was through. Tamon signaled for the power to be cut, then stepped across to examine their handiwork. He hunched over it for a moment, then turned to Atris and nodded. Slowly and very carefully they removed the bit, an airtight seal inside the sheath, clicking shut behind it. As it did, Catherine, wearing special gloves, removed the bit and hurried down the steps to where a temporary laboratory had been set up. Immediately, Karad and 3 others came across and lifted away the heavy frame that held the drill, carrying it down to the foot of the steps. They waited 20 minutes while Catherine analyzed the air sample from the tiny capsule in the bit. Satisfied, she nodded to Atris. Just air. Stale air. Okay, Atris said, turning to Eras, who stood nearby, the scope, a long, curiously furred shaft with a lens at each end, and a small bullet-shaped extrusion at its tip, held against his chest. Let's see what we have here. Eras stepped across and, very carefully, inserted the rod into the end of the sheath, the special seal within the sheath opening before the scope's tip, the continuous circles of fine hairs on the scope's surface, which gave it its furred look, maintaining an airtight seal even as the rod slid into position. As the end of the scope clicked into place, a finger's length of the shaft protruding from the surface of the sheath, Eras turned to Atris. Atris, will you be the first to look? Atris nodded, then came across and, crouching, put his eye to the lens. There was a small catch on the side of the shaft where it protruded. Atris now placed his thumb against it and drew it back. There was a muffled pop, and the surface of the lens, which had been dark until that moment, now glistened with light that was reflected in the pupil of Atris's eye. The muscles about Atris's eye puckered. He drew back the tiniest fraction, and then he nodded. "It's not a tunnel. It's another hallway. Smaller, narrower too, with pillars set into the side walls." "Can you see the far end?" Catherine asked, stepping up alongside him. "Just," he said. "It's almost in shadow. There might be steps there. It's hard to make out." "And a doorway? Is there another doorway?" Atris shrugged, then moved back, straightening up again. "I don't know. As I said, I couldn't make it out. Here, Marim, your eyes are better than mine. You look." Marim hurried across, then crouched, her eyes pressed to the lens. For a time she was still and silent. Then she moved back. "I think so," she said. Then, "But there has to be, surely. I mean, why build all this if there's nothing on the other side?" Oma was about to comment, but Atris quickly interceded. "Let us waste no more breath speculating. Master Tamon, bring up the cutting equipment. Let's breach the seal. I want to see what's at the far end of that chamber."